All right, welcome everybody to Nixon Peabody, Silicon Zombies. Round of applause for these guys. We've got some delicious brains in the house. Maybe we can start recording. Oh, beautiful. You know, before we get things kicked off, I think it would be really cool to honor some of our special guests. So Zamir, come on.
Thank you so much, guys. It's a pleasure to be here, watching these people speak, and you're gonna have a lot of interesting insights today. Nick is doing an amazing job in promoting entrepreneurship, talking about innovation, the VC landscape. Today we got about 20 founders from Kuwait. I just want to give them a round of applause for coming all the way here to Silicon Valley. Raise your hand. We want to see you. Great. This amazing group. This amazing group is here for 2 weeks. They want to know and learn everything about Silicon Valley, about the venture landscape. So we have a full program for them. So, if you see them, talk to them, connect to them, because they want to do business here in the United States. They're very eager to learn. So our job today is to observe and see how, top experts in the field convey the data to us. Thank you so much, Nick. I appreciate it.
Thank you. All right.
By the way, there's a big difference between just a regular expert and a top expert.
The top sit on the top chair, right?
Yeah, you've got 2 top experts up here at least.
All right, welcome to Silicon Zombies, where you get the best brains from the Bay and beyond. So super exciting times at Nixon Peabody. We're going to be discussing we've got Alex, we've got Peter, all rock stars in the space. But before we do that, let's go ahead and set the table.
Folks want to do a quick introduction, and then Peter, I believe you've got some lovely slides for us to share with as well.
I'm not going to share all these slides, but I'm happy to share an intro, just like 600 or 700. Hey everyone, my name is Peter. I run the Insights team at Carta. Carta is an equity management platform. We have about 45,000 startups on the platform today, and that gives us this beautiful access to aggregated and anonymized data about what the heck is happening across startups. So excited to share some of that with you today.
Amazing. All right.
I'm Alex Johnson. I'm the CEO of Velvet. I used to sell coffee, and now I'm in venture capital.
And Dinosaur Bones.
Dinosaur Bones.
That's before or after.
We haven't sold the T-Rex yet. Don't tell anybody. And Velvet's an AI analyst for venture capitalists. So it actually harnesses all the data that they're working with daily, reads it for them, writes investment memos. And we got a really good look into how venture funds work. So I'm excited to talk about all of that.
And TechCrunch co-founder Keith Teare is now on second rank. Keith, please.
Ooh, I should correct that.
Yeah.
My character's listening. He's not
Okay.
going to lie that.
Co-founder. Sorry.
So me and Mike Hankin did create TechCrunch and Crunchbase. That's true. But I was the majority shareholder, and he was the guy who basically ran the whole thing and made it good. So I get zero credit except for stealing equity.
Who made the better deal there? I don't know.
And by the way, I gave him most of it back, and he ended up being the majority shareholder because that was the right thing to do. That's really so.
What a star.
It doesn't happen, by the way.
So if you can't tell my accent, I am actually British. I've been here since 1997. I was the CTO of Europe's first internet service provider, EasyNet, which IPO'd in 15 months and became a unicorn within about 2.5 years. I then escaped from the UK, never to go back. Best decision I ever made. I created a company called Real Names. Those of you from Kuwait, if you ever type Arabic in the browser and it goes to a web page, I invented that. That was Real Names. It works in Chinese, Korean, everything. And Real Names was also a unicorn within 2 years. Didn't IPO because the bubble burst. So I've seen the story that we're living through now before. Then the TechCrunch thing happened, and after that started looking at venture capital, but through the eyes of somebody who wants to fix it. And SigmaRank, which I run today, is an AI, machine learning, and heuristic platform that scores companies as they evolve from the pre-seed to the seed to the A. And if they score well enough, we invest at the B round and created something called the SigmaRank Index. If you've ever bought an index on a stock exchange like S&P 500, we're that for venture-backed companies. You can buy our index for $25.54 a share. And today you get 20 companies in that are the top B rounds in the last 12 months. Over time, it will become 200 companies. So that is significant.
Remarkable stuff. Before we get into anything further, I want to do a quick shout out to our friends in the Codex, our sponsors. That's necod.com. So if you're looking for web or mobile developers, these are the folks to talk to. They've done remarkable work for our community, like Visita, SidePocket, and maybe Sam as well, and some great folks. So augmented teams, go to necodex.com. And also, thanks again to Nixon Peabody for having us at this beautiful facility today. Definitely check these guys out. Excellent work. So, you want to get us started?
Yeah, let's jump into it.
Okay, beautiful.
Should I run them
Should
from
we unblock the
No, no, no,
screen?
you're good. Nobody needs to see these really, right? That's not the point. But I would like you all to jump in as we go through this. So what I'm going to show you is just kind of fast forward through the data we've been seeing about what the heck is happening in venture over the past, call it 5 years. I'll kind of ground the conversation about whether or not we need to fix it, as Keith thinks, revitalize it, as Alex thinks, or I think it's totally fine. Okay, so that's from our lawyers. Because we're in a law firm, I thought I'd include it.
This is all financial information.
I am not a lawyer, nor am I an expert, so probably ignore everything. You can get this deck if you find it interesting. Of course, just email me. So to be honest, this is basically the only slide that you need to tell you what the heck is happening across U.S. venture right now. We are not in a bubble today. We were in a bubble in 2021. 2021 was the aberration. And that extreme level of funding, nearly $70 billion in a single quarter getting invested into Carta cap tables, that has set the stage for all of the issues that a lot of startups are facing today, with overvaluations and down rounds and layoffs. And sure, it was brought on by interest rates, but the capitalization of these businesses really shot skyward in 21, and now we're just kind of picking up the pieces at the moment. You can see trickling back up in the last few quarters. I'm optimistic. Actually, quick poll. Who's optimistic about 2025 for startups? Okay, fantastic. That's long. Count it. All right. Nobody's having much fun. It's worse the closer you were to IPO, but it's not fun anywhere. And then for the founders in the audience, especially those our good friends from Kuwait, maybe you're going to hear a lot of venture wisdom from old practitioners here in the Valley over the last 2 weeks. One of the things they might say is maybe you're going to fundraise every 18 to 24 months, right? Our data shows that's pretty out of date. So you shouldn't be planning on being able to do it every 18 months, because if you run out of cash, then the business shuts down and we've got nothing to talk about. And we'd really love to talk about you. So hold on to your cash, plan for a little bit longer so that we can discuss you in a future Silicon Zombies episode. Down rounds are up. That's no fun for anybody. Next. Shutdowns are up. That's really no fun for anybody. Big shout out to all the founders who are trying to make it happen and then unfortunately have to shut their businesses down. That's really rough. Good signs are on the horizon though. Startups are getting bought. Now, probably a lot of these purchases are fire sales. Nobody makes that much money, but a lot of the rumors about 2025 include a big uptick in M&A from private equity firms and other people. Keith, what do you think? Is that going to happen?
I think the numbers are, you have to break them out into AI acquisitions and the rest to understand what's really going on.
I've spoken like a guy who's super invested in AI. How are we supposed to drink some Kool-Aid? Yeah, no. Okay. Quick show of hands. Who thinks AI is a hype bubble like crypto? Or who thinks, raise your hand. Who thinks AI is the next big thing is going to fundamentally change everything we do? Okay, we're in a room of believers. Yeah, sorry. Maybe I was in the White House. Okay. I think I'm in the middle, but I'll be a believer tonight. For what? Why not? Okay. So what happened to startups? If you're going to describe it in these bullet points, this is it. Tons of fundraising, a dramatic shift in interest rates then happens. There's a scramble to figure out in the new normal. And in the very middle of that downturn, the introduction of ChatGPT and the explosion of AI. So within a venture downturn, we had an AI bubble. And that is causing a lot of distress and confusion for a lot of founders out there. Because it can seem in one day like it's the best time ever, and in another day like all their friends' companies are shutting down.
Put AI on the pitch deck.
That sometimes works. If you're going to take anything away from this, Kuwaiti founders, put AI in the picture. It always works. Keith will invest at the beat. So you just got to get there first. Yeah, that stuff. Okay, valuations. We're going to breeze through this. Skip. A lot of people get started on SAFEs, AI companies, as we just mentioned. That's the orange line. The black line is for non-AI companies. You can see there is a gap, sort of a bit of a premium to AI at the very earliest stages. And if we go to seed stage, AI kind of opens up a pretty serious premium. So whereas you might say the company is worth 14, 15 million if you're non-AI, here in the States, it's more like 20 million if you are for seed stage. It's pretty expensive, honestly, long term. And the same thing is true for Series A. Pretty expensive numbers here. I know, Keith, you track this as closely as I do. I'm not sure how you feel about these high valuations, but a lot of the VCs that we talk to say, look, we know they're high, we just can't not invest in these companies. So I'm not sure if you feel the same way.
To me, I always work backwards from the end. And so I think OpenAI is very cheap at 150 billion because I think it's going to be multi-trillion-dollar company.
Are you in OpenAI, Keith?
I am not, because I'm not allowed to invest on my own pocket anymore.
That's a damn shame. We'll get to that, Keith. No worries. We know something. If Sam, if you're listening to this pod, reach out.
Keith's ready.
Yeah,
That was my way to stop you all coming to me after.
Okay, so what did founders do in the face of all this stuff, right? Well, the first thing that you all did was you stopped hiring people. So if you look at that black line, that's just total new hires at startups on Carta, month over month. 70,000 new hires in January of 2022, 27,000 in January of 2024. So every single person that's being added to a tech startup these days is being scrutinized a lot more heavily than they were before.
Is that because of interest rates at all, do you think?
I think it's a huge, interest rates is a huge part. I think it's VCs looking at interest rates and then going back to their companies and saying, hey, you may be overhired here. Your payroll is out of control.
Get skinny.
It's kind of time to get skinny, which unfortunately results in that orange line, which is all those layoffs that we read about. Really tough. Luckily, I think that's starting to edge down. I think we're through the worst of it. But I mean, Alex, as a founder, how do you think about hiring new people? Or do you think about automating them with AI?
Yes.
Yes.
Great answer. I mean, yeah, I'm always thinking like all of my team uses AI. Like we use it in every system. We build an AI product to automate things. So
Right.
we're always thinking about how to automate things. Every single junior person, senior person.
Yeah.
I think less about hiring people, but you always need talent.
That's right.
But talent is, prerequisite by capital. Always.
Totally. So this follows the funding, as you can imagine, pretty closely. So what does that mean? It means that startups are smaller at every point. So if you were raising a Series A in 2020, maybe you had 18 employees, 20 employees. Now it's more like 14, maybe 13. And in a year from now, that might be more like 10 or below. Smaller companies moving super fast. That's the name of the game in venture right now. Yeah. Unless you're OpenAI and then you open offices everywhere because you maybe already won. And then for startup employees, that means that unfortunately there's some law of supply and demand here, and their compensation is getting impacted, especially on the equity side. So it's a little bit more difficult to find the right startup and join them today than it used to be, both because hiring is down and the comp isn't quite as good as it used to be. This is a shame. As someone who started their career in early stage startups, I really hope that we keep that pathway open, because a lot of early stage employees end up becoming founders, which is what we want. Okay, so what's next? We're gonna skip past the boring stuff about funds because it's boring, but it is important, I promise. Okay, prediction time. Venture funding, I think it's coming back. So that's total capital invested year by year. Your estimate for this year is maybe 10, 15% above where it was in 2023. I think it's going to continue on the upslope to 2025, and 2025 is going to be a better year than the one that we're in right now. Also, if you're raising on that AI company valuation stack, there's some eye-watering valuations still happening. Those are the ones we get to read in Keith's publication, TechCrunch, which you founded alone. You heard that here today.
Thank you. I'm going to be, I've already said my disclaimer, and if he's listening, he's heard it.
That's right. So you're saying he's not going to listen to the full pod. Yeah, exactly. So just to wrap it all up, funding has been difficult to come by for a lot of founders, but there's still a lot of capital out there. I think 2025 is going to be a better year across the board. And the question is is it only going to be a better year for AI companies, or are other companies going to kind of join in the fun as well? And maybe we can talk a little bit about that now. So that's what we know. Hopefully that was useful.
Fantastic.
Let's talk a little bit about technical viability, and this was more for you two fellows. When we're looking at hiring folks, how do you establish that? Because it's a moving target. Like these things, like new tools are coming out daily. The Microsoft CEO just came out and said that half the code is generated by AI. So, like, how do you figure out if somebody has technical chops to be able to hire them?
You know, the way I think about it, well, let me just give you an anecdote. I've spent the last 24 hours building a Python app running on Snowflake using Streamlit. That is the qualification engine for single rank. It tells, you put in a company's B round and it spits out yes or no, and here's the reason why. I did it entirely by myself using AI, and I don't know Python. I just don't know Python. but I know how AI works, and I know SQL, and I know what I'm looking for, and I can explain what I want, and I can say if it is giving me stuff that doesn't meet what I want. 24 hours later, we have just an amazing qualification engine, which previously was you had to go into Snowflake and run SQL code. And now it's a web page, and I did it. I would not hire anyone to do that, either outsourced or insourced anymore. I just wouldn't. We're 6 people, by the way. I have 2 data scientists. The data scientist, yesterday we had a problem. We have to do this job. He said, well, I'm super busy on the data science pipeline, so it's going to take me about a month. So I did it myself in a day.
Is this a performance review live on a pod?
No, by the way, no, just in case he's listening, his stuff, we have a heuristic, and his machine learning just beat my heuristic after 2 years. So he's doing a really good job. He shouldn't be building websites, but neither should anyone else.
Yeah.
No one should be building websites. If you're in Ukraine doing outsourced website building, you haven't got a future. You really haven't. Outsourced Python, you haven't got a future. My 23-year-old son just got a job at Snap doing back-end engineering. At 23, he's already paranoid about being laid off because his skill isn't needed. I think that's the real world.
So where are they shifting?
They're going to have to retrain. I mean, actually, AI is pretty stupid, as we all know. So running AI is not just telling it what you want and there you've got it. There's a lot of work in making the AI actually produce useful stuff.
Sure.
And so there's going to be retraining, I suspect.
Yeah, the rapid iteration comes from the contextual knowledge. Like, so the cost to build anything now is like half of what it was a year ago. It literally is. I measured developer commits twice as much after we started using Microsoft Copilot for everything. So the cost to just build anything has gone down so much, which has made everything more competitive across different verticals. Like you can spin up products like that. ASAP, I can spin up a website ASAP. The big unlock, I think, is like you need product visionaries now more than ever. I have like Oura rings on all my devs too. That helps.
Just to keep track of them?
Yeah, you just see how they're doing.
See
How much of this is your finger doing?
So you tie their productivity to their emotions?
Yeah, I mean, and back to
Perfectly
the
normal.
That sounds really good.
But
hey, it's a tech company.
there is a serious point under that, which is, there was a good article a few weeks ago saying that specialisms are the most impacted. And what AI is really bad at is being a generalist. It's really good at being almost any kind of specialist. So if you're a generalist and you want to get stuff done, you could spin up 10 AIs, one for each specialism, and probably make a lot of progress. But the AI couldn't do your job. So and hence the smaller company prediction.
Sure. Yeah. We're certainly implementing AI in Carta in interesting ways, but I don't think we've seen it necessarily replace people yet. But to your point, augment or like kind of eliminate the need for a ton of headcount to come into the business, where we're just going to continue to get better and better at process improvement that way. It's definitely happening across the board.
So Carta's market cap is 40 billion, just like Snowflake, the company Keith mentioned a second ago.
Exactly 40 billion.
These are massive, massive companies. What about
It's not, by the way.
Isn't it?
It's not 40 billion. No.
I think it's like,
Much lower than that. Yeah.
okay. I'm glad I'm alive. Yeah.
Sorry, Henry.
Yeah. So we're getting there though.
Yeah.
But shifting over to the early stage companies, if like let's say they have a handful of new customers and they're ready to scale, what are the biggest challenges that founders are seeing in the scaling process?
You're in it now.
Intimate to that problem. I mean, I think like a lot of the edges were eliminated and like speed to build product. Like I was just saying, it's so much easier to build product now. So like everything's getting verticalized rapidly. Like so we build in a very specific vertical. We built an AI copilot for venture. So we intimately just go understand, okay, what's all the things we can automate from like deck to decision on a fund? Because VCs are lazy and they never have enough time and they're trying to make better decisions. So every industry is like that. Like legal has vertical already. The same is going to be in like investment banking. I'm talking a lot like finance stuff, but same with like all real estate things, all this.
Do you think it's going to materially change the cost of company building, or is it because it's more competitive, you need the same amount of money that you used to, or maybe more?
I think it's already changed. It's leveled the landscape in ability to to do it, but to scale, yeah, you ultimately need headcount at the end of the day. So I think it's going to concentrate the winners in a much faster way than we've ever seen before. That's what it feels like being deep in it. So.
When you talk to your founder friends, do you feel behind all the time? Or is it like a consistent conversation? About
if you run a company, you always feel behind. Right? Always been. It's like you got the shotgun all the way in your mouth, and everyone else has the trigger.
But if you remember when Web 2 came around, this concept of the lean startup emerged.
Yep.
And I always reacted against that because I was a startup founder, and the hardware was not one of my biggest costs. My biggest cost was people. And so I just thought, this is BS. Unless the team's working for free, it isn't a lean startup. It still costs the same as it did before, minus maybe 10%. But now it really is. Because if you don't need as many people, and you don't need an office, and you really don't need a cloud. I just installed LM Studio on a Mac, a good Mac, running Llama locally on my machine, and it's fantastic. It's really, really good. So you don't even need a cloud actually that much.
Right.
So the cost of everything is going to shrink, which means your ambitions can grow. It also means you redefine the meaning of the word traction. Venture capitalists have done one bad thing in the last 10 years.
Just one.
Apart from this one thing, they're fantastic. They basically redefine success as short-term traction. It's a bit like in basketball saying if you're winning in the first 5 minutes, it's great. And not caring about the end result.
Do you think that's kind of mirrored in the public markets as well?
Public markets are more honest because these companies, in public markets, you really are a value machine, whereas a startup isn't yet in the early stage. So in public markets, you can use numbers and you can score people using apples to apples scores against each other. I think in private markets, the most important variable is how big it could be. And the second most important variable is the team able to move towards that? And none of that's measurable, really. You can kind of put your finger in the air and guess it. And most VCs will not invest in a small idea where the end game is small. It's got to be huge. And they won't invest in a team where there's a disconnect between the aspiration and the team. You won't do that.
Because the market, though, too, there's a combined expectation of being able to do a lot more with less now, too. So VCs expect you to stay like the lean startup thing's bigger than ever.
Yeah, but I wouldn't take money from those people. I honestly wouldn't take money because if they are so focused on the monthly spreadsheet, my company when it's early stage.
So that changes at the B or C when there's actual real revenues to speak of, et cetera.
It changes post product market fit.
Okay.
I had John Fisher on my board, one of my companies, and he was like my best friend until we had revenue. Then he became my worst enemy in a good way. And that was appropriate.
Are you still friends?
He's retired. I haven't seen him for a long time. So,
No retired friends.
but I would still be friendly with him.
Sure.
So Alex, you mentioned a little bit about from deck to decision. Certainly due diligence is somewhere in there. How is AI impacting the process of due diligence? Because that feels still kind of like a gray area for a lot of folks.
Yeah, I mean, my big this is messed up moment was the FTX moment. I was getting shopped like FTX secondaries like a month before it blew up.
Okay.
And if you know that story well, it was a big diligence failure story. Like if you read big into like the Sam Bankman thing, like they had all their financials in like a Google sheet that they didn't keep updated, and nobody asked for that. Sequoia and whatever Ontario Teachers Pension, and it's because they're all following signal. Because like VC, ultimately, there's a lot of herd mentality in it because it works. In fact, that's the foundation sort of some of your model for generating returns. So you're asking about diligence. The problem with private companies is they're all different. They're very different. You have way less data. So diligence looks entirely different per firm. You have checklists. It's hard to get the information out of founders, period, even just to keep the companies updated. The whole foundation of our product is like read all of these things for investors so they can be smarter and make better decisions and not overlook something like that.
Mm-hmm.
We don't do any company diligence because our scoring engine is a score. I won't go into how we make the score, but the score works. It backtests super good returns, like 1 in 3 times. Our companies do at least 5 times their money in 5 years based on backtests. So it works. The only due diligence we do is it really a company? Did these people who say they invest in it really invest in it?
Yeah.
So we look at the cap table.
Yeah.
We look at legal formation. That's about it.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to ask how many people of the 6 that job entails, just looking up the websites, but maybe it's not that many.
It's our one East Coast team member.
Good.
He's
ahead of the time
He's
zone.
a hedge fund guy. He calls himself the chief operating officer. If you're listening, Matt, that's a good title for you. And he basically has to do all the legal stuff and all the accounting stuff. And it's one person, and it isn't even a full-time job for him to do that.
You can moonlight at Washington Post or something like that instead.
Right.
So we've got, I believe you and Kayvon have a couple of home runs from last year, two, I believe, in the unicorn steps. Can you give us a little bit of a background on what both of those are? And did you know they were going to be home runs, or did you wait until your proprietary system told you that it was the right horse to bet on?
So we never know if an individual company will be a winner. When you're doing this kind of work, you have false positives and false negatives, true positives and true negatives. Our true positive rate is 32%. So that would be like a VC being right 1 in 3 times. And most good VCs are right 1 in 10 times. So it's very good. But we're wrong 68% of the time. On the negative side, we're right to be negative 83% of the time. That's our secret sauce. Our algorithms are good at saying no, and what's left is better than the whole. That's basically what we do. And obviously that means we're wrong 17% of the time on the negative side, so we miss a lot of good companies. So that's how it works. And if your job is to, venture capital is a power law business. You have one winner and a spread of other outcomes down your portfolio. If you can build an index that creates an average that includes some power law companies, some others, and the average is very predictable. Our average is 6.2x in 5 years. Then that compares to say the S&P 500, which is less than 2x in 5 years. It's extremely good, and so we're trying to build averaging in venture. That's the goal. And then we want to list so that you can. Right now, I can't sell shares to you unless you're accredited or qualified, meaning rich. We want to IPO in the next couple of years, so you can all buy these shares just like you buy an index in public markets.
Can you talk a little bit about? You and I have had a couple discussions about illiquidity.
Yeah.
So everyone talks about venture as power law, but I thought you made a really wonderful point in a recent article where you said actually everything is power law. We look at the public stock market where most of the gains coming from 5-6 companies.
Yeah.
So what is it about illiquidity that makes venture different?
Yeah, so probably no one in the room will be familiar with the acronyms, but venture capitalists measure success using acronyms. One is MOIC, M-O-I-C. It stands for multiple of invested capital. And it's basically measuring paper gains that you can't cash in. So if a company goes from an A round to a B round to a C round and its valuation goes up, your MOIC goes up proportionately take into account dilution and value, the MOIC goes up.
But your bank account is the same.
But your bank account
For now.
The second one is TVPI, total value to paid-in capital. That includes all your exits, that is liquid, and your illiquid ones together, and it's mostly illiquid. About 10% of B round companies have an actual exit. It's ridiculously low. That's B round. It's way lower at early stages. And then the third one is DPI, distribution to paid-in capital, which is you actually give cash back. There's very, very few venture funds that ever have a positive DPI. So the power law in venture funds means there are some at the top that do, but even those ones don't do it every fund. It's every now and then. So what happens is if you build an index of private companies and then you list, so your shares are in these, you've effectively returned MOIC into DPI because your shareholders can cash in the paper value, but whatever the market will tolerate. If you type in DXYZ into your Google Finance, you'll see there's a company doing that, trading today at 10 times the value of the companies on public markets because private assets are in big demand on public markets. So liquidity to me is a structural issue that I think Sequoia and Andreessen think about this. They've both changed their structures in the last few years. And I think part of that is to create more liquid vehicles with the ability for investors to draw money out. Public markets are the right place to do that. Imagine if we took every liquid unicorn as private and put them into an ETF and did 100% share swap with each of them. That thing, they'd all be liquid, even though they're not public.
Wow. So
Coming soon.
When we think about trends, also who has a LinkedIn in here? Probably everybody. Definitely follow Peter Walker. He's probably got some of the best content that I've seen on the platform. You get a lot of visibility into trends in the space. What are some of the more surprising trends that you're seeing right now?
Well, one trend is Keith showing up in my LinkedIn feed all the time. He's nice. Keith is also a great follow.
He's a magnet for me getting new followers. Every time he publishes something, here's the trick: republish what he said and just put a one-line comment.
Sometimes it's just a question mark. It's like you're not doing any work, man. This should be mine. I love it.
But at least I have 60,000 followers on LinkedIn, so it must be good for you.
I deeply appreciate it. It's mostly Keith. What are some trends for founders that are important here? Look, we went through a in terms of AI premiums versus non-AI companies, right? There's a investors, though they may have taken a couple of strays in this conversation so far, are getting much more discerning about what they consider an AI company. So it's no longer the case that you can put AI in your deck and actually expect a meaningful valuation premium. You have to prove it. You have to prove why AI uniquely enables your business or why it is that capital spent here is much better than capital spent there. It's no longer as easy as putting the right words in the pitch deck. So that's number one. The second trend, and probably the more important one, is there's a lot of startups that are, and maybe Alex, you could speak to this if this is what you're trying to do, who are really deeply considering, do I want to take venture at all? And then if I do I take one round and that's it? Right? So instead of going through the alphabet stages, do I get to seed or A, and then I'm done? And I get to some sort of profitability or unit economics that makes sense for my business, and I grow the way I want to grow. And there's a lot of founders who are experimenting with that path. There are a much smaller pool of VCs who are excited about that path. And I hope that they're honest with each other in the conversations that they're having, because I think some of them are not.
Yeah, there's lots of talk around the venture model changing in tons of ways. I mean, what I see really intimately, venture funds in this consolidatory period are trying to be way smarter. They are being way more discerning. They are all super ambitious about actually trying to enable AI too. So they're thinking more like tech companies now. We share with that data-driven VC channel. And there's a whole community of funds that are trying to actually quantify venture more. And this is the broader trend I think you'll see in the market that I think will ultimately be good for everyone. Is one, if you build more transparency, you're going to bring liquidity in the same way. And I think private markets are going to start to look a lot more like public markets over time for founders.
I think the other thing is AI really is just another word for LLMs right now.
Yeah.
And LLMs are not a solution to most problems. They are really good at some problems. And I don't really agree with those people that mock them for sometimes getting it wrong. It's so amazing that they ever get it right.
Yeah.
And they get it right a lot. But like Simran, we are not AI measured by are we an LLM. We don't even use LLMs, apart from me personally using them for work, but we don't use them in the product. We were not even machine learning before or deep learning. We were just a heuristic, basically heuristic based on understanding how the market works, building algorithms that can pass the data through that, and testing whether the results of that would have done well historically, and then tuning them and making them better. It's a heuristic. We now have ML that's better than the heuristic, but it's ML. It's called XGBoost. It's tree-based ML. It's really good. It's better than what I can do, but I can't tell you why it's good. Why? Because it's a black box.
Sure.
It's got all the features of the heuristics and then some, and it does a better job. But I don't know why. And investor isn't going to give me money unless I can explain why it's good.
Yep.
So we use the heuristic publicly.
Right.
We're not even using the ML publicly. We use it internally. So I think we're in this nuanced period where the buzzwords are starting to lose their power because we're all becoming more educated about what tech actually is and what it's good for.
Yes. One final trend, a little bit on the VC model sort of changing a little. Final trend for founders, which I think is ultimately disappointing, is that I think it's very obvious that you are probably going to run into a lot of VCs with whom you have meetings who are not investing. So there, to this point, we saw the startup shutdowns. In startup world, startups grow and die, but they do so usually fairly quickly. In VC world, you may not know that you're at the end of the life of a VC fund for 5 years after that fund has stopped investing. They're still probably willing to take a meeting with you. So it's kind of tough.
They're still getting paid.
Sure.
So
I mean,
maybe
you said it. I mean,
would be like, when is the last check that you wrote? Would be a good one for founders to make sure they're not wasting valuable time.
I think it's a wonderful question. I mean, if you can set it up a priori and go on PitchBook or other places and just look it up, Crunchbase.
It's easy, actually.
Crunchbase is actually pretty great. It's a cool site.
Nowhere near as good as
So yeah, solo founded, one of my favorite solo founded companies. But it is, I think, really important because, and it's not, I don't want to just rag on VCs too much. I kind of understand why they're doing it. They may have a little bit left of that fund, right? They may have 1 or 2 more investments to make, but your time as founders is super valuable, and time you spend fundraising is not time you spend building. And that can get really tricky in a downturn like right now.
Peter, why don't you talk a little bit about the new venture fund money, the scale of it, and how many funds it's going to?
Yeah. So yeah, when you look, founders who are trying to fundraise from VCs have a mirror of that problem trying to fundraise from LPs, right? And those LPs are everyone from high net worth individuals to family offices to mutual funds to sovereign wealth endowments, all across the board. Something like 80% of the capital that's been fundraised by VCs this year has gone into mega funds of $1 billion or more. Those are names you're all familiar with, Sequoia, Andreessen, et cetera. So what does that mean is that the emerging managers having to work a lot harder to fundraise, and emerging managers are disproportionately likely to invest in things like first-time founders, the earliest check in your business, that kind of thing. So it probably will have knock-on effects to this business. And in some ways, VC, we talk about VC like it's one monolithic thing, but a $10 million fund on the one end and Andreessen that $2 billion in a fund on the other, they're playing different games, and that matters to founders. So I'm not saying don't take the Andreessen check, they're fantastic, but you are playing a different game than if you take the check from the emerging manager.
And the other thing is that one of the reasons that's happening is what's happened to the late stage investors in the last couple of years. And that's worth adding because this new mega funds are replacing something.
Yes, the late stage investors who have waited around for IPOs and not had any is whom they're replacing. Like, look, if there's one thing that you can ask of the startup ecosystem to make 2025 a much better year than 2024, it's just the return of IPOs. You know, that is going to be the major unlock to this ecosystem. So if you have late stage founders, you do, Alex, that you call all the time, get them into the public markets. We'd love to see it because it would be a huge recycling moment for a lot of emerging managers, other VCs, and kind of a signal to the rest of the ecosystem.
Because that's where all that capital goes.
100%.
I'm an
Goes back
investor
to
in
the-
Miro, if you know Miro, whiteboarding and stuff.
I thought you couldn't be an investor.
It's predates the grandfather. Therein lies the story. When I got my shares, it's because they acquired a company I was in, and I got shares in return, and I got 100,000 Miro shares, which were then priced at $17 billion of valuation. Well, the valuation today in secondary markets, which is pretty illiquid, there's not many trades, but insofar as there are trades, it's like 6 billion. And they just laid off a third of the staff to get profitable, so they could get on an IPO track, because the bar now has risen on an IPO. And now it's like 5 years later, there's no chance I'm getting any money for those Miro shares, probably ever. I did a similar one with Infarm. Infarm was valued at 2 billion, raised 2 billion. It was valued much above. German vertical farming company, and I owned a big chunk of that. They raised from the Qatari Investment Authority in 2020 December. They went bankrupt in June 21 because
6 months.
they couldn't raise more capital. They were huge capex. They were building huge farms, and they went bankrupt because the capital markets dried up for them, and they weren't profitable yet, so they couldn't IPO. So these are massive structural changes that are not fixable in any short-term way.
There's a lot of whiplash left.
So let's shift away from AI for a moment and more to the human element. This is one specifically for you, Alex. We all get 24 hours a day, 168 hours in the week. How are you being more efficient with your time to make sure that you can keep the progress for Velvet?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think all founders get kind of optimization and obsessed. So I have like a hyper scheduled day. My calendar is like blocked every moment. 30 minutes for health, don't forget.
Yeah.
When does that happen?
Sundays. Everything that's menial tasks I've been trying to delegate more actually to AI, especially just around synthesizing emails, also just ideation a lot of times. I do that all the time. That's what I say.
What do you think of the grind culture that kind of infects SF more than most, I would say?
Yeah, we're all constantly shaming each other, right? into working harder.
Right.
That's the fuel that pushes us into ingenuity. At the same time, there's been, I think I was at a founder retreat in Mexico City a bit ago. There's a bunch of exited founders, and it was like group therapy. Everyone was talking about the mutual suffering that is shared amongst founders. And these people who have exited, huge companies and built them multiple times. One of the conversations was of the belly of the whale. Some people were discussing their hero's journey through the deepest depths of despair and hopelessness, because your identity is so tied to your mission and your thing. You're all in. That's your hustle. It becomes you. That's the toxic part about it, is you let it destroy you too, and you realize you can't control it.
So how do you keep a healthy balance there? Because you're the face of the company, but you're still your own human being.
Yeah.
Are you Velvet or are you Alex?
Yeah, which one am I? It's a really balance. You have to run very relaxed no matter what. And I think it's just mainly being conscientious of yourself. You forget about yourself 99% of the time because you're worried about everything outside of you, and then you realize you're starting to hollow yourself out. I spent Sunday with the Elkin Point Reyes, and I've been killing it this week.
Excellent.
Did they become customers, or was that not?
I couldn't sell.
You're getting close.
How the target market was.
So you shouldn't listen to my views on this, because they're the antithesis. So firstly, there's a huge advantage in being British, because you really don't give two hoots about health. So you don't have to go to the gym, you don't have to run. I'm British, I don't have to do any of those things. The second thing is, when I put my team together for Signal Rank, they asked me what my ambition was. And I told them my ambition was to do the least possible work with the largest possible outcome. Which is consistent with the way we work, actually. I'm a slave to my desk. I don't even have a cadence, but it's because I'm in love with my work.
Yeah.
It doesn't even feel like work, to be honest. But if it did, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
I literally wouldn't do it.
Yeah, well, what you do is you take it for sure.
So we're going to open this up to the audience here. So if you have any questions, feel free to just chime in, raise your hands, and then we can kind of get the ball going. And while you're thinking of these questions here, oh yes, go ahead, Andre.
Okay, great talk. Really enjoying hearing from all of you, and I think my question, my background is I work at Meta, and we are probably trying to catch up to OpenAI. And I think my question is really why you feel, or why you might think OpenAI has such an incredible lead right now in this space. And you talk to the average person on the street, and they think AI equals ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And so, what was it about OpenAI that has captured so much market share so quickly? And what can potential other competitors like Meta or Anthropic or others do to catch up in this
Could
space?
you restate the question real quickly for the next
So the question is, why do I think that OpenAI is such a lead? And the person asking the question is from Meta, which by the way, I did say I'm using Llama at home, so there you go. Yeah, don't tell Mark. Mark used to actually live on my street in College Terrace. I can tell you some anecdotes. So my answer is this. OpenAI to me is the nearest thing I've ever seen to how liquid moves in any environment. OpenAI doesn't have to do anything other than have a chat interface and an API for everyone in the world who has the mind to try it. And so there's no sales needed, there's no marketing needed. It's all pulled into your environment by your desire to use it and see what it does. I didn't choose OpenAI against others. In fact, I use Claude AI a lot as well, the Anthropic one. It's sometimes better than OpenAI for certain things. And I think it has the same qualities, but it doesn't have first mover advantage, but it's roughly as good. And I think Llama is as good. I actually think the one built into X is fabulous. It's easily the best one for images, but it's built into X. So I think Google and Meta and X have a disadvantage, which is it can't act like liquid because it's contained within an interface. The API stuff and the downloading open source, yes, that gets you some of the way there, but OpenAI, every consumer can make it feel like liquid, like coming into their environment. So you can't stop it spreading. It's just spreading like wildfire because there's nothing standing in its way.
What about the dynamic between a closed model like Apple and then Hugging Face and some of these other platforms where it's really kind of open source? Do you think that Apple's in a maybe they've got an existential challenge because like a small group, although there's benefits around privacy and whatnot and control, they can't beat everybody. So how are you thinking about the open versus closed model for development?
I think they both have merits, honestly. Philosophically, I would be always inclined to like open source more than closed source because then I can do stuff with it myself. But actually, practically speaking, I do a weekly newsletter called That Was the Week. I always do an image that comes from a tutorial. I always use the built-in on X because it's so much better than all the others. And I really don't care that someone owns it. I pay for X because of it. It's $20 a month or whatever it is, $8 bucks, I can't remember. Not enough for me to remember. And I will use it, even though philosophically I may be more inclined to use Hugging Face because it's practical. So I've kind of decided you can't be too political about open source versus closed source. It's better to be pragmatic about what works, as long as the cost is okay.
But if you were Tim Cook, are you nervous right now?
If I'm Cook, I'm owned by OpenAI because Siri is so bad, I mean, really bad. It's not even close. So, by the way, it's Alexa. That OpenAI, he probably would have been prepared to pay to have it in there. By the way, it sucks. It's way better to launch the OpenAI app on iOS than to try to use it through Siri.
Yeah.
So he hasn't even gained anything. I tried to do a summary today using summarization on iOS. I'm a developer, so I've got the latest builds. It said, what you're summarizing is way too long for me to summarize. I wasn't built for this. So it's
Employees of the future.
knowing Apple, you see, Meta knows this, which is why AI is so important and Quest is so important. Owning the user interface between the user and everything is a huge advantage. So the fact that we all live in smartphones today, you can't get around that. Google may be a contained environment, but it's on every Android phone. And Apple is, but it's on every iOS phone, and that's 100% of the world. So they're in a massive advantage, and they can suck and still win. But OpenAI has played the game very cleverly because they're in every environment. From day one, they're in every environment. You can use it. And you will choose to use it if you know what you're doing because it's better.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe can you elaborate a bit more on the monetization path for AI founders, which I believe it's quite complex right now, and also from a VC investor perspective, then what would be the multiple of this revenue to make valuation?
Yeah, if you could
repeat the question.
Well, the most important thing is to not generate revenue. Then you're pre-revenue, right?
Then
it's all dreams,
yeah.
and it's dreams ahead of you.
That really screws up the traction VC.
It makes it easy who's on board and who isn't. Look, I mean, monetization on the AI, I think Alex could speak to this maybe better than I could, but it's there are kind of two models emerging where there is a model that seemingly still requires tons and tons of capital, right? And some VCs are willing to fund it. And then there's a model on the other side, which is we are going to automate, streamline, and clear as much as we possibly can using AI as we build this business, and maybe we won't ever take capital, right? So there is an explosion of smaller SaaS, et cetera. The question is, will those ever be able to be venture capital scale? Or is the increased competition going to sort of blot out the speed advantage that's given there? So maybe you can speak to like how you're thinking about monetization in general.
Yeah, absolutely. So to start there, I got to think about this one a little bit. What was the, you made this post, I think a bit ago, I think it was your chart. AI SaaS companies, I think, are approaching 1 million in ARR twice as fast now as traditional SaaS companies.
Wasn't my chart, but I'll take credit.
Yeah, I just assumed it's your chart because you won't get off my feed.
Thank you. Yeah, doing my best.
And I think that's the result of the acceleration, right? Of course, like the go-to-market speed of AI companies has been like unprecedented. I'm trying to remember the image generation based in Discord. They got to like 300 million in revenue.
Midjourney.
Yeah, Midjourney.
Yeah.
Midjourney is the key example of that. I think they had like a 10-person team for a bit. They got to 300 million in ARR on that. So the go-to-market path is greatly accelerated because this is like such a game-changing space and everyone's so curious about it. Customers are open across the board to new solutions. Like everybody's trying to understand how to implement AI, whether it's an enterprise or it's an SMB customer. In terms of like you had a question about valuations. I mean, you also have a lot of good information on this. He's actually making sure I can't raise it 100x multiple right now.
Keeping you honest.
So it's how good a negotiator.
But I think realistically, like AI companies in general, because of this growth rate, you can command quite a higher valuation. So if like how I see the market right now, the expectations are still a lot higher than they were like in 2021. Like a lot of investors want to see like 1 million ARR, even on seed deals, to come in at like a 20 or a 30, or if you're an AI company, a 60. That's kind of how I've seen the market go and how I'm feeling it.
Do any of you subscribe to Substacks? Hands up. Not very many. Interesting. I think agents are the key to monetization. I think the foundation models will share the pie when it comes to API calls and consumer subscriptions to chat interfaces. But I think SaaS, which is usually in the middle between the user and the cloud, all the logic and business logic that exists in SaaS and their interfaces, I think are threatened by AI agents. I think consumers will be the first to benefit from that. And I would expect to see a flourishing of consumer interfaces using AI that does stuff. They'll probably try to have subscriber for that, but probably some of them will have advertising. Those are really the only two models.
Yeah.
I hope it's subscriber more than advertising, and there's price low enough that you can afford it. The reason I asked about Substack is I think I have about 200 things I read on Substack, and you get subscription overload.
Yeah.
And with lots of agents, an agent, by the way, for those who don't know, is just kind of a AI that acts on other AIs to make AIs collaborate together to achieve a task, some kind of task. Could be booking an airline ticket or updating your calendar or telling someone you're late for a meeting. There's a million different versions of that. Some of them will be free, but some of them will be very valuable. I think there's money in that. But I do think the pie from tech is going to shrink, maybe by as much as 10x over 10 years, because how easy it is to do things and how cheap it is to do things. So the total pie is going to shrink, and growth will come from new things that are built on top of that.
Yeah, SaaS automated specific tasks for us in the cloud era of like computing. You know, we built a bunch of SaaS software. Even CRMs like Salesforce, they're like scrambling to implement AI right now.
They're shaking.
You can imagine that now. That was the first wave. The second wave, and Sequoia has a really great article on this, like the generative AI Act O1, whatever. Yeah. And agents will likely replace most of these daily tasks. It's already getting kind of close to that. Like we experiment a lot with this stuff. You can automate things from start to end contextually pretty accurately now, a lot of things. You can imagine a new age, even a CRM, isn't people like typing things in. It's AI reading everything, pulling the data in for you, and then doing work on it, sending emails for you, doing tasks for you. This is like getting really close to being possible.
Oh.
Yeah.
Piyush, please.
Hi, great panel, by the way. Loved the comments so far. My question, I will switch away from the AI stuff. Oh, by the way, I have been a data and AI practitioner for the last 30 years from IBM Watson days. But now my focus here is right now to understand, given the current scenario, what are you seeing? VCs typically used to have 7 to 10 years for the founders, and PE folks would want returns in 3 to 5 years, maximum 7. Are you going to see a shrinkage in that model? That's basically my question right now.
Me and Peter both measure this thing called cadence. Maybe I mean,
You take it, please.
well, so I'll tell you the way I think a signal rank. We do a B round, and the only question in my head is how quickly will it do a C or a D? You asked the question earlier about K-band. 3 of our 20 companies already did post B rounds within the first 12 months. Actually, the cadence for B to C average is about 1,000 days.
Yeah.
So they did it super fast. So probably that means we're picking some good ones, but it could be accidental. Who knows? and so cadence is how VCs think. Now, if it's 1,000 days from a B to a C and 1,000 days from a C to a D, which it roughly is, and there's no IPOs, good luck putting any number of years on your exit. I mean, you can't predict your exit. You're probably not going to have an exit, and then the money dries up.
And the money dries up, which is no fun for anyone.
Hate that.
Hate when the money dries up. Gosh, I wish the money had not dried up. Look, VC funds, if you are thinking about investing into a VC fund and they say they can get you money back in 5 to 7 years, you've either got the greatest VC fund in the world or you're talking to a liar. One of those two things has to be true. Because right now, the median time to IPO is something like 12 years. And the median time of a fund life cycle, it used to be a 10-year model. Now it's more like you should expect to be dealing with that VC fund, managing distribution, et cetera, for 15 years. That is an incredibly long form of time. And that extra 5 years, if we call it the 10 to 15 jump, that increase in illiquidity has to be matched by a corresponding increase in valuation up, right? And it hasn't been to date. So perhaps we'll all be investing in Signal Rank's indices, so we don't have to deal with that sort of thing. Or there's going to be some big flame outs. And that's the question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Well, you shared a lot about valuation and we see now seeds and pre-seeds are pretty much high.
Yeah.
A's, B's, D's are low. But what is the situation for the going public? There are a lot of thought leaders saying now that it's not about being unicorn anymore. You have to be 5 billion at least. Is this correct? What do you think here? And I think it's a follow-up on this question as well, because if you're investing and you need to go IPO, so now it's like there's a slide after the A, then you have very high threshold to go public now. So want to know your take on this. Now we are in 2024, and what do you think about 2025?
It looks like Lena Khan might be getting the boot. How's this changing this
Yay!
I'm shocked that it happened.
Yeah, Keith is into that. Look, when it comes to what it takes, what's the bar for IPO? Clearly, it's higher than it used to be. The real question for me is like, it's almost impossible to tell given how few people have actually IPO'd. So it's mostly guesses at that point. One of the problems that I see with the biggest late stage private companies is they don't really need to IPO. So if you're SpaceX, what do you care, really? You have basically infinite private capital available to you if you need to fundraise further. You can use secondary transactions to incentivize your employees, and you avoid some oversight, regulatory speaking. So it's like a pretty good gig, right? So like the names that we all want to go public may actually paradoxically not have to. And that, in some ways, is keeping the cap higher, I think, than it would be otherwise.
That's what Jamie Dimon's so pissed about, all the capital keeping things private.
Tough for him.
Yeah.
Poor guy. Yeah, go ahead.
So follow up on this. You mentioned on ETF for private companies, and isn't that why, let's say, BlackRock got into Preqin and acquired, and there's I'm coming from public markets, from MSCI and indexes and all those things. So that's what we've seen all the time, that demand for data on a private capital.
It's because it's the access point.
Yeah.
So, I mean, anyone here from BlackRock? Anyone here from Invesco? Okay, I can't say a word about Invesco then. Invesco runs QQQ. Actually, a friend of mine is the product manager for QQQ, French guy, Vincent. What's his name? Never mind.
Good, close friend.
So probably not. So yeah, when Larry Fink made a speech after Preqin was acquired, saying it was the earnings call. It was the CFO actually that said it, that private market indexing may be the biggest opportunity BlackRock has ever had.
Yeah.
Which is quite a statement.
Big deal.
Because they manage trillions, and I can tell you, based on what we do, we're very public about it. We have a very open conversation with BlackRock. So I know the people that run the systematic investment team here in San Francisco very well, and they mainly are public markets investors. I know they, for example, they couldn't invest in us until we list, but I would be pretty shocked if they didn't when we list. I think they will, and I think we're just one index, right? We're Series B index. There's going to be hundreds of indexes. There's lots of different. You just have to be able to get the assets together and hold them. So I think there'll be lots of indexes, and public markets will start to become a liquidity vehicle in lots of different ways. Not ETFs mainly, because because of redemptions, but probably closed-end funds will be the vehicle, which is the Investment Company Act of 1940 will be the governing law. And you'll be able to do a closed-end fund, which is what DXYZ is. And they've already done it, so the legal path is very clear. And they're trading at 10 times NAV, which is ridiculous, but true. And by the way, and they don't have good assets. They're buying common shares from employees. Right. So it's even worse that they're doing that. So, but that tells you if you do this in the right way, it's probably very valuable. So I forgot the question, but I think...
So the question was, isn't that where the markets are?
Yeah, I think I hope that's where it's going. I mean, I tell my investors to expect us to be public by the end of 2026. But for that, I need an AUM of at least 300 million. Guess what? My AUM today, by the way, I'm not embarrassed to tell you, is only 15 million. So we're very early in that journey. Yeah. But I think at 300, we're basically 10 times bigger than DXYZ with better assets.
Invite us to ring the bell with you, Keith. When it happens.
I might be dead by then. You know?
When your co-founder hears about it.
Rob will love it.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about generating revenue from the gentleman over here. And also, Brendan, can you maybe read a couple of the questions that we have from folks remotely in just a moment here? Thank you.
Yes.
And while she's doing that, where should founders be focusing on? Like, you know, in the past, recently, maybe they built a wrapper around some of these things, and all of a sudden, that entire market gets obliterated because these models were actually building them themselves. So if you each started a firm today, a new startup, where would you be focusing? What kinds of things would you be building?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I think there's like 3 real modes post AI that are still defensible. The first one is data, lifeblood of AI, proprietary data particularly. So data that models don't have access to, that you can somehow harness, that you can use to better inform your customers, make smarter decisions. Our example is we structure data out of private market markets that only investors have, and we use that to enable their investment process. The second is workflows. So save people time. Famous way of making money. So if you say like focus on the things that people are doing and look for ways to automate that and make that really good and defensible. You're the only person doing that. And do that in a way that's so verticalized, maybe with agents and these things that a generalist model can't do it. And then the third would be networks, right? So capturing networks. I always think of like AngelList is a great example of capturing a very high signal network that grew massive, I think $4 billion company now. You know, being able to get your users to interact, whether it's like in a marketplace or in certain ways with a new product. I think if you have like the combination of those 3 things, you're pretty rock solid. That's how I look at moats now.
Yeah.
It would be my general advice. Back to the wave of private market data too, really quickly. Omni is a great example of a company that captured data too, that JP Morgan bought into. Mm-hmm. And liquidity is going to be led from the top down. And you can see that across the board. Like I also have a lot of conversations in this space too. And the biggest trend would be large asset managers coming down into private markets because they're returns driven. And there's great returns there.
Yeah, Cujo, please.
So how does, first of all, very, very good panel. Thank you so much for being here. How does data and AI influence the venture world as it relates to capital and investment in emerging markets? And also considering that a quarter of the world's population by 2040 is going to be in Africa, a third of the labor force is going to be in Africa by that time. How do you think that's going to affect the venture world going forward in the future?
Yeah, I mean, information is like the foundation of investing. So as data opens up more of the world, like even just like I can probably search now on Perplexity for like some decent companies, maybe that are like popping up in some emerging market, you know, in like best companies in Bangalore that Perplexity thinks. And maybe I use that to source. This is a very simple example, but information is like the core of everything in data. And I think generally all markets are going to open up a lot more. I mean, I think that's the broader discussion too. In the private market, I think it's going to come more online. And so will all these emerging markets, you know, as a result.
Yeah, 8 of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world right now are in Africa. AI is, especially with accessibility, is driving everybody up. It's a rising tide. What do you think about this, Keith?
So I think AI in venture is currently mainly used to supplement existing venture practices. So, for example, discovery companies is a lot of data and AI in that. Signalfire, for example, is very good at that. And they use things like credit card information to see, you know, which companies are getting traction with customers. And they're buying, it costs roughly $1 million to buy credit card information. So you've got to be pretty well off to be able to get into that game. I think it's same for due diligence. There's quite a lot of, there's a company called Affinity, by the way, that's really good. There's a platform for venture intelligence and data, and it's global. I think Africa is a special case because Africa has a history of leapfrogging the rest of the world due to the fact that it starts late. My wife's South African, and I can tell you there were no landlines in South Africa, just mobile phones. very early. And WhatsApp became the biggest thing in South Africa very early. Nigeria is going to be the third or second biggest country in the world, depending on how aging pans out, and it's rich. Nigeria is a rich country in terms of raw materials and minerals. So, and venture is already happening in Africa. I subscribe to a couple of Substacks which are about African venture. It's growing. I actually registered the name Africa VC with a K about 10 years ago and asked Tim Draper if he would help me do an Africa fund, and he said no. Because you could see it coming. I mean, but it's going to take a while. So I think the data in Africa is not very strong yet, so it's hard to use data. You've got to get on the ground and meet people a lot, especially Kenya, Nigeria, even Ghana a little bit. Egypt is huge as a market. So Africa's a coming thing. America's and China, to me, are the most interesting thing when it comes to data. We have masses of data to do with China.
That's okay. Amazing.
Let's see. Any more questions? We want. Oh yeah, go ahead, please.
I have a three-part question.
Can we boil it into two?
I can combine two. So in the funding trends, we saw that in 2024 the funding dipped. I mean, for 2025, the new project funding increased.
Yep.
Why did it dip, and why do you project it to increase? That's one. The other one, how much of it do you see going to climate insurance?
So it didn't dip in 2024. It's actually higher than 2023. We just aren't through the full year. That's why that chart looks a little bit funny. Yeah, but it will increase in 2024 from 2023. And then how much of it goes into climate? The two themes that I hear most about these days are climate and AI. AI much more than climate, but still climate as a fund. I think that people are very expansive about how they use the word climate. So it could be climate tech, and it's, you and I probably wouldn't think it is, but it automates something that eventually down the road would save us a little bit of electricity, so it counts as a climate fund. It's very broad sometimes. I will say that renewables has been one of the consistent performers over the last 2 years in our data, renewable energy startups in particular. So in that sense, this pivot towards, hey, VCs are more interested in people that are making physical things in the real world, probably has some good things to augur for renewables in general.
Cool. Well, we're about ready to wrap up here. And of course, you chat with these folks after the show. But let's take a quick moment to like a plug or a shout out or a website. We always, the zombie community wants to be valuable to the speakers here. So let's go ahead and do maybe a website shout out for you, Keith.
My own website.
Or which you could pick whichever one you want.
Thatwastheweek.com, personal newsletter. AI curates the stories I read and pulls it into the best stories of the week, and then I write an editorial. So if you just want to know what's going on and you haven't got time to read, it's pretty decent. And then signalrank.ai. I'm so ashamed that it's a .ai. Signalrank.ai is where you can see our data, and we give it away for free mostly because it's not threatening to us to do that.
I'm on the opposite side of the shames X spectrum. I can afford my AI domain. It went up 100 times over. Dude, it's velvetfs.com. Maybe gonna be
FS, like Frank Sam.
Yeah, like
okay, velvetfs.com.
Gotcha. It's like,
so you can check us out.
FS stands for fucking superb.
I love it. The best tools.
The only best. The only the good. So good, man.
Oh, I wasn't meant to swear.
It's okay, he's British.
If you're looking for Carta data, it's super simple. Carta.com/data. Everything that we publish lives there. So.
Beautiful. All right, well, round of applause for these guys. It's okay. It's probably just Wi-Fi. End stream.